The Trojan War is over. And now there's a dark age. It's sort of like you sit down to enjoy a puzzle. The puzzle is a picture of a glorious trophy for the big win. And as you're opening the box, the power goes out. There's no light, and you're rummaging through the box and you feel it's half empty. We're missing a bunch of pieces. And then you realize in the dark, it will take you 400 years to put this puzzle together. In this lesson, we'll actually get through all 400 years, and we will find one puzzle piece called the Cup of Nestor that will take us from the Trojan War all the way to an island off the coast of Italy. And we'll find the Greek Cup of Nestor one more time with something very exciting that shows us the Dark Age is over. Welcome to Classical Kingdoms, where timeless stories reveal truth and wisdom for your journey. This is lesson number 26 in your ancient history course. We're stepping into the story of the Greek Dark Age to discover how it shaped history and how it still shapes your story. So in this lesson, we're going to explore the mysterious Greek Dark Age. What is a Dark Age and what causes them? Next, we'll see how valuable that Trojan War story was and how it helped pass along the Greek identity through this Dark Age. And finally, you learn about writing, Greek writing. It's the new version that gets everyone out of the Dark Age, and we have proof. It's not easy to end a 400-year Dark Age, so the special healing cup of Nestor will be our proof. So picture this. The Trojan War is over and you've won. You're a Greek and you're returning to your home city. A home city like Mycenaeans. You find the palaces have been destroyed. They're in decline. You've been gone for a very long time. One of the ways this Dark Age was evident is these city-states are no longer strong and powerful. Mycenae was known as a superpower. They call these palaces the grand palaces, and they're like cities with trade and the hustle and bustle of economic activity. They're abandoned. They're destroyed, having been attacked, having not been cared for. And we see this is starting around the time that the Trojan War ended, 1184 BC. So this is a period when we noticed less economic activity and less power from these formerly strong city-states. We used to read some of the trade records. In Linear B, we saw what they were buying and what they were selling and what they were storing. And poof, all of a sudden, this stuff is gone. We no longer have evidence of trade records after this time period. That's one of the ways you know you're in a dark age. You don't have records, you don't have writings, you don't have stories. There's nothing new that's happening in the hundreds of years after the Trojan War. It's a dark age. Linear B writing is not recording economic activity. It's like a dark fog is being rolled over the lives of the Greek people because no history is being recorded, and we can't look to any of these places, these palaces, for the kinds of records we used to see back in the Bronze Age. We call this a dark age. And this only happens a few times throughout the history of the world. It could happen again. Big, centralized, strong city-states and their economic centers are now gone. People are now just kind of living in small villages. But it could happen again. Imagine going from a big city with huge warehouse stores, big box. You've got a strong government, a mayor, and then it just stops. Abruptly stops. You no longer see these jam-packed parking lots filled with shoppers. It's just an economic decline and people living just in small villages. The archaeological evidence from this Dark Age time is about a 400-year period that there's very little to show. And that is evidence that we have a Dark Age. Do you remember some of the spectacular treasures that were pulled out of the Mycenaean tombs? These grand tombs with gold face masks are no longer happening. We don't see any new big stone buildings being built during this time period. And with the scarcity of the activities, the records, it all points to a dark age. Now, what's contributing to this? Was it invaders? Was it the Dorian invaders coming from the north? Well, yes, some people talk about these migrations of other people from the north, the Dorians. But how about the Sea Peoples? Should we also blame them? It's time for the topic of the Sea Peoples. Often discussed and blamed, but still mysterious themselves around this time period, they're sailing around in ships, apparently wreaking a lot of havoc. They are attacking people, they are weakening people. And so, yeah, let's go ahead and blame the Sea Peoples here too. In Egyptian records, Pharaoh Ramses III mentioned some of these, and there's different names associated with them. So we think the mystery is partly because there's no one group of Sea Peoples. They might be a variety of different ethnic groups, and they might have eventually settled in some places like Gaza. One of the groups of possible Sea Peoples are the Philistines, and you might know that Goliath is a famous Philistine. We also think maybe some of the Celts who came out of the Black Sea and eventually go to France and eventually go to Ireland. Some of these Celtic ethnic groups might also be Sea Peoples. But whatever they are, and they remain a mystery, they are a menace, like pirates. The Sea Peoples are weakening the Greeks that used to be strong and contributing to this dark age. We don't know for sure because it is a puzzle. It's like we're trying to put together this puzzle in the dark. So don't think the Sea Peoples are the only factors causing weakness. But what about internal rebellions inside some of these Mycenaean kingdoms and other Greek city-states? But there must have been massive earthquakes still happening. We know it's an area with a lot of seismic activity. But the climate is always changing too. So famine, problems with the crops, combined with volcanic activity, it could be a big cloud of ash. So historians and scholars today still wonder about this mystery, and they think a combination of these different factors contributed to this dark age, something that still could happen again today. And you as a historian should recognize when multiple factors like this could contribute to a dark age, and you'll hear some of these again in future lessons. Because without strong palaces and leading city-states, without written records and their international trade networks, the Greeks are going to struggle, and we're going to have this 400-year dark age. But here's a struggle that seems to have been overcome. And I want you to wonder how this happened. The Greek identity gets passed along through those 400 years. So in a difficult, dark period like this, how do you keep your stories, your beliefs, your identity as a people? How do you keep that alive when everything else seems to have kind of fizzled out in this dark age? Imagine in today's world if all of our libraries and books and internet and screen time, if just all of this stuff vanished, how would we pass along an identity of the people that we are today? You know, what is your identity and how would you want to pass it along? You know, you could have kind of a dark age on a very specific level. Let me give you an example, like the Ohio State Buckeyes. Let's say they stopped winning football games altogether. That's the big one. But then every other sport, they just stop winning and people stop enrolling at Ohio State University. And this goes on and on and on. Would the identity of a Buckeye, you know, like I was raised because my dad was a professor at the Ohio State University. So would my identity as a Buckeye be forgotten? Well, this is a unique puzzle. And if you have a suggestion on how to prevent the identity being lost, put it in the chat right now. So think for a second, because I'm about to tell you what the Greeks were saved by, when it comes to passing along this identity. How can you preserve your identity in a dark time when it seems like everything is going so wrong? How would your culture survive? If you have an idea, put it in the chat. But let me move on to our second main point, which is the answer to this question. How could our culture survive? How will the Greek identity be passed along through the Dark Age? And the answer is oral tradition, storytelling, word of mouth, sitting around a campfire and telling the story. And what story were they telling? Well, we know they were telling the story of the Trojan War, the heroes, the battles. And there's a lot more writing that we'll get to besides just the Trojan War story, but through spoken word, the oral traditions and myths and legends and poems are going to be passed down from generation to generation. And we are talking about a 400-year period. That's a lot of generations. But it's absolutely crucial for people to pass these along because it tells the history of the Greek people. And it worked. And it's going to help us end this dark age, because out of this tradition emerges two of the most famous names in all of literature, the Greek writers Homer and Hesiod. Homer, of course, is our writer for the Trojan War. He wrote the Iliad. So he's the writer, not the creator of the story, we don't think. And Hesiod is another famous writer from this time period. I'm throwing him in so that you're, wondering why I only ever talk about the Trojan War. We know the Iliad tells a story of the actual Trojan War, but we see the characters. We see the heroes, people like Achilles and Hector, and remember some of the characteristics that they had, and remember some of the struggles that they had. This is the legacy. Overcoming that struggle, that agony, the agon, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, the way they behave. And of course, the war has its tragic costs. You know that Homer also wrote the Odyssey. The Odyssey is also a 10-year story. It's the journey home of the clever Greek heroes like Odysseus, the one who came up with the idea of the Trojan horse with Athena's help. But they're going to have to battle monsters like the Cyclops and overcome temptations like the Sirens, and they get lost and deal with a lot of struggles and ultimately overcome. And that strange story kind of harkens to what the Dark Age was started off as. So start to think of these oral traditions almost like cultural encyclopedias, records that were being shared around a campfire of some of the Greek values and virtues, their religious beliefs, their social customs. They are teaching Greeks what it meant to be a hero. They're showing what the gods are like in their glory and in their imperfections. It shines a light into what's right and wrong. Hesiod was a poet from around that time, and in his poems, he shows people's character. Not the Trojan War, but in his poem called Works and Days, it was ordinary people, mostly farmers. And a couple of new Greek words for you today, like dike, which is a virtue that focuses on justice and righteousness, and ergon, another virtue which recognizes hard, honest labor. Hesiod had a story of a talking hawk who captures a helpless young nightingale. The nightingale cries out, she's in so much trouble, and the hawk just kind of taunts and shames and shows his authority and power because he's a bird of prey. And in this character of the hawk, you start to not like the hawk. It's kind of going over the top. And you get a sense that this is not even a just act. It's not decay. And to show respect for honest labor, ergon, Hesiod said, the path to badness is easy, but the path to goodness is long and steep. Hesiod describes one path as easy and smooth, the path of wickedness and laziness, which leads to ruin. And it shows you the identity and the values of the Greek people through these poems and countless other stories. They're told and retold over and over again for these hundreds of years. And so the Greeks are preserving their moral compass, their cultural identity, and they're doing this without writing it down. If you want a deep dive into more around this time period and how the evidence shows the Greek history, I've got free deep dive downloads at classicalkingdoms.com. That's also the place for you to get the full course experience. Go to classicalkingdoms.com for sample courses and deep dive downloads. So what's next? How did the Greeks climb out of this dark age and reestablish their civilization and make it even more dynamic than it was before? And by 800 BC, this is now like 400 years after the Dark Age. And we know they're telling stories around the campfires. And they've had some difficult challenges with the Sea Peoples and their economic decline. And there's no more written records in the Linear B. But now the new topic of writing is a new type of writing. We're going to learn a new set of letters. Thanks to the help of other trade sea people like the Phoenicians, the Greeks now have developed their own Greek alphabet. And that's going to be here to stay. It's not like Linear B. The Greeks learned about alphabetic writing from the Phoenicians, who were the skilled traders and sailors from the Eastern Mediterranean. They adopted the Phoenician script to fit their own language, and they crucially added certain letters for the vowel sounds. And so this new Greek alphabet was much easier to learn than Linear B, and easy to learn means it catches on and it will spread. So suddenly writing wasn't just for the scribes and the high-level palace officials. Now it could be used for far more things because more people are going to know. And this is when poetry gets written down. Do you know that the Iliad is actually an epic poem? The Iliad and the Odyssey. This is the first time we're seeing literature being written down. It's not just about business records. It's not just about laws being written down. It's everything. Does that sound exciting to you? That is the evidence that we see a culture is going to light up, and light means not dark. We are leaving the dark age with the help of the Greek alphabet. Now, where could we find one of the earliest examples of the Greek alphabet? I'll give you a hint. It'll be on a certain healing cup that was mentioned in the Trojan War, the Cup of Nestor. Now, maybe you haven't heard of the Cup of Nestor, but check this thing out. This is not the Cup of Nestor, but it is a replica from the same time period. It's around 800 BC when there's a lot of geometric shapes that they put on their pottery. So these pottery designs are very uniquely Greek. They're really pretty cool. That's from Corinth. Corinth is a place that pottery was very high quality. They made a lot of it, and the designs and sometimes people and the things that are on it tell a story. Pottery can actually be used as like a written record. Well, we're kind of seeing that here in the Cup of Nestor because it has writing on it. New writing, not Linear B writing. The Cup of Nestor actually has an inscription on it about Aphrodite. Now, what's really strange is that this cup, being mentioned in the Iliad up in Troy, it was made on the island of Rhodes, but it was found in a Greek colony way over by Naples, way over by Mount Vesuvius. Checking this out on the map, do you know what a colony is? Do you know that Greek settlers were leaving Greece to go start new settlements in different places? And southern Italy was very popular. There are a lot of Greek colonies in southern Italy, and this one is called Pithecusae. Pithecusae is an island just off the coast of where Mount Vesuvius is, where the modern city of Naples is, and it was founded just after this Dark Age period, around 775 BC. And we find this Cup of Nestor there. Now, what's so exciting about that? It is actually exciting that it's something that was mentioned as a healing cup in the Trojan War story and was made so far away from where it was discovered. But what's so exciting about it, it's one of the earliest uses of this brand new Greek alphabet. Colonies like this were not just outposts, they are actual Greeks that wanted to have thriving centers of Greek culture and trade and spread Greek influence far and wide. So when they have Greek pottery there, it's going to have Greek letters on it. And when we read what it says in the new alphabet, the new Greek alphabet, it's a little poem. And it's basically a little poem that says, I'm Nestor's cup, good to drink from, and whoever drinks from me will be seized by desire for Aphrodite. Something like that. They're kind of a little confused as to what exactly means, but it's something about Aphrodite, and it's a good cup to drink from, and kind of a popular shout out to Greek culture, and maybe a part of that story to the Trojan War and what Aphrodite did in seizing desire, Paris and Helen, kind of like that. It shows people are already using the alphabet that seems to be pretty new. And now that we have the Greek alphabet, and now that we're seeing writing used for stories like the Iliad, like the Odyssey, Hesiod's poem, we're seeing geometric pottery on the Cup of Nestor and a lot of other pottery from all over the Greek cultural areas. We see the identity of the Greeks, and we see that it survived the 400 years of the Dark Age. And it's kind of an artistic explosion. It's life, it's vibrant Greek culture with beauty, storytelling, and a sense of order now that was missing for the 400-year period of the Dark Age. And do you know that people liked poetry competitions? Games are becoming more popular, and we're about to invent the Olympic Games at Olympia, where they will always have a poetry competition along with the sports. So we see the Greeks are coming together from different city-states with cultural unity. They don't have like a strong government together, but coming out of the Dark Age, the Greek identity, the Greek language, the Greek alphabet, it's clear as to what it is. And they're united in their past history through a story like the Iliad and the Trojan War. Besides writing, we can add on top more technological advancements, like bronze tools are getting replaced by iron tools. Iron ore was more common in Greece than copper and tin, and since people now know how to work with it, iron tools are going to be used. They're stronger and more durable. And this shows a technological advancement. It shows the Greeks' resilience, their ability to adapt and be inventive. The Greeks invented so many things, and this is the end of the Dark Age. Things are going to start to speed up. So how do you think the Greeks' creativity and human flourishing is going to take off? They've got a new alphabet. They've got beautiful pottery. They're developing new tools. They're starting new communities, new settlements in a variety of places. So do you have any predictions right now of what's coming next? The Dark Age is over. Put it in the chat. What do you think the Greeks are going to do now in the upcoming lessons? We can see that the Dark Age ends, the Bronze Age ends, the Archaic period has now started with strong city-states, with the alphabet, new colonies, Homer, and coming soon are the Olympic Games. So let's put this all into perspective, that if we say the Trojan War happened around 1184 BC, and Mycenaean collapse was around that same time, the Greek Dark Age stretches across this 400 years to 800 BC. And archaeologists try to dig up evidence for this time period and find very, very little. But the oral traditions and the stories of the Greeks that were passed down throughout all of this time are the real enduring stories, not just for the action, but for the character and the virtue that was preserved. The ideas about heroism and justice and human nature, and the search for excellence, the Greek erate. This is what goes on to influence Western civilization. And it's a type of identity that we see all over in today's world and in your culture. So in some ways, the Greeks didn't just survive this Dark Age, they were transformed by this. Even though they lost their strong city-states and palaces, they found their identity passed along in the stories that were told over and over again, and then eventually written down in epic poems. Can you think of any modern examples, either in the world today or your own life, where really difficult times actually led to a significant growth, like personal growth or cultural growth or new ways of doing things? If you have any ideas, share them as a response to this lesson. Thank you for taking the time to learn something that matters in all of history. And that includes your history, some classical truth for your journey, because kingdoms rise and fall, power fades, but virtue endures.